welcome everybody. This is the latest in our series of seminars. We've got wonderful Jillian McBryde to speak to us in a minute. But before we do that, I'm going to hand over to Simon, Professor Simon Christensen, who's going to tell you a little bit about DIGITLab.
Great, thank you, Roger. Yeah, this is one of the series of seminars hosted by DIGITLab. And just to have a little quick explanation of who we are and what we are a UKRI centre that's funded for the next stage digital economy. And we cut across a number of disciplines. So we cut across computer science, management, psychology, engineering, design, to look at how we accelerate the adoption of digital technologies and drive forward innovation, what the impact is on growth, on transformations within large established organizations. So we are a 12.4 million funded centre, and the team is much more than myself. So we have Roger here as well. We've got people from University of Exeter, from UEA, from Oxford Brookes, and also Royal Holloway in there, plus a number of industry companies and partners with us. So we are around 5 main areas, from understanding technology test beds and how you scale technology, looking at digital business models, but also within that, looking at the role of data exchanges and data governance, organizational structures as we go through digital transformations, and understanding the impact on individuals on well-being. We have a 5th package on data-driven design that integrates some of those thinking, but looking at how we adopt digital technologies for new products and services in there. And I think that's largely it, just to say these are the main questions that we work on. So these have are broad. So we look at productivity, impact on the individual, and sustainability together rather than one alone. And framing this, we have digital innovation. How do we best make the use of digital technologies? Understanding growth and clean growth, bringing that sustainability with productivity. Understanding the impact on individuals, whether the employee or the end users, and also supporting that digital transformation process. And now I'm going to hand over back to Roger.
Cool. So yeah, my task is to introduce Jill. Jill and I have known each other, I was just saying to her, for over 20 years, I'm afraid, a long time back. Jill McBryde is Professor of Innovation and Operations Management at Strathclyde University. And also she is director of the world famous Hunter Centre for Entrepreneurship, which I suspect most of us are very well known to most of us. She's on the UK Innovation Caucus, so she has an important role there, and a member of the UK Future Flight Board, which some people on this call might be very interested in too. I know that I am. But most importantly, and what's particularly relevant to DIGITLab, is that she, along with Janet Godsoe, runs the Made Smarter Network Plus Interact, and consequently has a lot of influence on and is engaged in lots of the discussions of the future of UK manufacturing. And that's where we asked Jill to come and talk to us today. So I'm really pleased to introduce my old friend Jill McBryde. Over to you, Jill.
Thanks very much, Roger. I'll just pull up my slides. Go. Just check you can see that, Roger.
Yeah, we can. Thank you.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us this afternoon. And thank you, Roger, for making me feel even older on a Wednesday afternoon. I think it's more than 25 years. An interesting fact for folk, Roger was actually my external examiner for my PhD. So we have a laugh about that, the grilling that he gave me way back 25 years ago. Anyway, as Roger says, I think the main reason I'm here today is because I'm co-director of Interact. And Interact is funded through Made Smarter Innovation. And Made Smarter Innovation is really all about bringing digital to manufacturing. So that's the space we're talking about today. Interact is particularly focused on digitization in manufacturing, but on the human side. So Interact is all about people, not technology. And today really is just a kind of introduction because I think we've got a heck of a lot in common, the DIGITLab and Interact. We've got very similar interests, and I think we could do an awful lot more together. So today I'm really just going to start the conversation off and tell you a little bit about some of my interests, talk about people and why I think they're really important in competitive advantage in manufacturing in a more digital world. So I'm going to start by saying, you know, I am enthusiastic about manufacturing. My main area of speciality, I suppose, is helping organisations in periods of change. So I'm not limited to manufacturing, as Roger referred to, doing some stuff as well on the Future Flight Challenge about how aviation industry is changing. But Interact is all about manufacturing. And a big challenge for manufacturers is obviously digital disruption. It's a challenge, it's an opportunity. And today, really, I want to open up that conversation. But unlike a lot of people you probably hear from, I'm not going to talk about the digital technologies in themselves, but rather I'm going to talk about the role of people. So my talk is basically in two parts. I'm going to talk a little bit about the future of work in manufacturing and the role of digital and how things might change. And the second half of my talk, I'm going to introduce you to Interact and Made Smarter and see if there's some areas where perhaps we could collaborate. So, as I say, agenda, talk about manufacturing, talk about why people are important and it's not all about technology, look a little bit at the future, and then introduce you to Interact. Now, happy to take questions at the end. People might want to put some questions or points in the chat, and we'll pick them up as we go along. But really, my aim today is to open up the discussion, share some thoughts, and really kind of introduce you to Interact and look at how we might collaborate together. So I should also say, I've always worked across disciplines. Now, when Roger met me, I was doing my PhD in an engineering department. And even before that, my first degree was in technology and business studies, where I studied manufacturing engineering and business. And that was kind of more than 30 years ago. And I guess that set me on a path of being interested in this intersection between kind of technology and more the social sciences. And if you track my career as an academic, I've spent time in engineering faculties and in business schools. So right now I'm sitting in a business school at Strathclyde. And one of the things I really love about DIGITLab is that recognition that we need to work across disciplines. So really that's what excites me just now. So let's start by setting the context in manufacturing. Now, some of you might be in manufacturing sector, it might be new to others, but I'm very passionate about manufacturing. And I'm going to share with you, my next slide is pinched from Make UK, who are, you know, an industry body for manufacturing, who gather a lot of data. Lots of facts and figures here, which you can get from the Make UK website. And this is a kind of snapshot at 2022. I'm just going to talk a couple of things that interest me. And as a simple person, I see manufacturing as being important because I want us to produce stuff that we need. And I want us to produce it in a sustainable fashion. And I want us to produce it at a price we can afford. And I think that's really important for the UK and our economy. We all need stuff. We need food, we need drink, we need medicines to keep us healthy. We want clothes, we want cars, we want all these things. And we recognised the dangers that happen when that supply of goods is cut off. During the pandemic, you know, we were running out and worrying about toilet rolls and stocking up on Lemsips and all these things. But it made us recognise even more how important manufacturing is. So I think that's important. And it is important that we're doing things in a sustainable fashion. Now, a more sophisticated economist, and some of you may be economists out there, you would argue that manufacturing is important from an economic perspective. It brings in money from exporting goods, it provides jobs. And without manufacturing, we wouldn't have nearly as much innovation. And we all recognise that without innovation, we're on a road to nowhere. So the economists think manufacturing is important. There's a few things on this slide. I'm not going to dwell on it. You can go and look at it on Make UK website. But one of the things I think is quite interesting is down the bottom in the middle. UK is the 5th biggest importer of goods in the world. Now, you might miss that or might not jump out at you. But I'm just going to plant a wee seed just now. If you think who are the biggest people in front of us, well, as you might expect, the USA. Well, they've got what, 332 million people or so at the last count. China, 1.4 billion people. And then you get to us, the UK, at just 67.5 million people. We're buying in a heck of a lot of goods for the number of people we have in this country. And that's probably a whole other talk that we could talk about. But for just now, I'm just planting that one for something I might pick up on later. So what do we want for manufacturing? Well, whether you're somebody like me who's enthusiastic about manufacturing, whether you're an economist, whether you're a politician, we all want to see a manufacturing sector in this country that's competitive, that supplies good jobs, well-paid jobs, and a happy workforce. We want to improve productivity, which we know we can do through manufacturing. We want to be sustainable, and we want this resilient economy that gives us ensured supply of goods. So all really important. And digital plays a part in that. So what does digital actually offer? Well, those of you who know a bit about the history of Made Smarter and digital in manufacturing will know we talk about the Made Smarter report that Jürgen Meyer led a number of years ago. And it talked about how we need to get better at innovating with digital technologies and adopting digital technologies. And that was going to be important for all these things we just talked about having a resilient, competitive manufacturing sector. And digital technologies can help us get faster at things, make things cheaper at scale, can help us become more sustainable, more efficient, and actually can make it easier for us in the organizations and make it easier for our customers. The kind of technologies that Made Smarter talk about tend to be the more industrial digital technologies. So things like additive manufacturing, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, sensors, robotics, additive manufacturing, these kind of things. Really exciting stuff. But I want to just press pause slightly and say, we need to invest in these technologies. They are really, really important, but technology alone is not enough. This is something I say all the time, but history tells us that whilst technology is really important, often some of the big challenges, the things that are crucial, are more human rather than technological. And that's really the theme for my talk and the theme for all the stuff that I'm doing just now. So Interact, which is part of the Made Smarter family, is all about looking at the non-technological sides. We're not ruling it out completely, but we're more interested in the human side. And thinking about how do we build this kind of future-ready manufacturing sector, we need to focus on people and their role in the digital transformation. Now, I've pulled up this slide, which I've borrowed from Made Smarter Innovation. And it really just illustrates that it's not just people in individual companies. I know the DIGITLab's focus is more in the larger companies, very, very important. But there's a whole ecosystem out there, and people play a part in all these parts of the ecosystem. So whether it be the large manufacturers, the SMEs, the people developing technology, the people adopting technology, the politicians, the universities, people are in all these places. And that's what I'm interested in. And we need to bring the people on board. And it might be about winning hearts and minds. It might be about motivating people to get behind digital, adopt it. It might be about training people in use of digital, thinking about the skills for the future. It might be managing change, managing performance, or it might be about how do we encourage people to collaborate. They're all human aspects that Interact and myself are interested in. Oops, wrong button. So I've kind of introduced my interest, manufacturing, and interest, the kind of role of digital. And I know you're all bought into this kind of the digital transformation space. And now I want to flip a little bit and maybe spend kind of 10, 15 minutes throwing out some of my own thoughts on what digital manufacturing workplaces might look like and some of the things that we should be talking about, and perhaps areas where the Interact community and the DIGITLab community could work together. Now, at the moment, I'm involved with Interact, and I'm actually leading a work package that's all about the future of manufacturing work. So we're out speaking to companies, speaking to policymakers, and speaking to the general public as well about what this future manufacturing workplace might look like. And some of the things I'm going to talk about are on this slide here, but I've got a slide or two on each of these. So let's start. Let's start by just being honest here, that industrial revolutions, if we look back in history, and Interact are looking back in history, we've got historians working with us, what we'll find is that in any industrial revolution, there's winners and losers. And whilst I want to be very positive about digital and all the things, all the promise it holds, we've got to be realistic and accept that there may also be downsides and losers, and we shouldn't lose track of that. So, you know, some of the things we might talk about here, the original, if you like, industrial revolution that gave us mass production, cheaper goods. You know, the downside of that was child labour, work moving out of the home and into organised factories, migration into cities and so on. And there was deprivation that went with that too. When we talk about the kind of computing revolution, lots of jobs that disappeared, you know, the kind of secretaries, posties, high street retailers and so on. So now when we're talking about digital, what are our kind of worries here? And the things that we might want to talk about, cybercrime, displacement of low-skilled workers perhaps. You know, there's a picture down there of Yuval Harari who talks about digital dictatorships and the worry of, you know, too much power in the hands of some people being able to use digital as a weapon. So there's things there that I don't think we should forget when we're talking about humans and human behaviour. Another thing that we're hearing a lot when I'm out speaking to companies and to people, general public, is that attitudes to work are changing and have changed really fast, partly to do with digital, partly to do with the pandemic as well. And I think one of the things that digital has helped with during the pandemic is giving us this flexibility that we needed. So it's changed people's attitudes. People are looking for more flexible working. People are talking more about 4-day week. They're talking about work-life balance. And now we're in the situation of the kind of financial situation we're in. People are also questioning, can they actually afford to travel to work? And some people have decided actually they want something else in life. And we've seen an awful lot of people leave the workforce. Now, all of these issues are hitting all types of work, but some of them manufacturing in particular. And one of the ones I think is really interesting is how do we help manufacturing to offer more flexible work? And I think that's going to be important. Another thing that I think is driving some of the changes we might see in manufacturing workplaces is sustainability. And again, that's something that, you know, we welcome, that there's been a big shift in attitude, and it's no longer kind of lip service to sustainability and greenwashing. You know, people are taking it really seriously. And I think some of the things we'll see is sustainability bringing about a shift in where manufacturing happens. You know, is that kind of, do we start to manufacture closer to where things will be used? And this is where I'm kind of bringing you back to that little statistic that we saw in the Make UK figures about UK being the 5th biggest importer. You know, what happens when companies don't want to be moving things around the world? Is that going to make a difference for the UK? The other thing I would say is on that same slide, some of you might have picked up, you know, about the UK being one of the world's 10 biggest exporters. The cars that we make in this country, the planes we make in this country, lots of different things. Lots of these things are being sent to overseas markets. And not just that, but lots of the parts that go into these goods are coming in from overseas. So lots of lots of questions I think are going to be asked in the coming years about where we manufacture, and things might change in the UK. And I think we've got to open our eyes to that a little bit. I mean, this week in the news, a lot of you will probably have seen people talk about the future of iron and steel in the UK. You know, staggering figures being put out there that iron and steel production in the UK is so carbon intensive. It's responsible for around 2% of UK emissions. You know, but can we live without that production of iron and steel? And these are not questions for me today, but they do influence manufacturing in the UK and what happens, what our workforce, what our workplaces look like. And I think digital has obviously got a big role to play in sustainability and in different ways. I think short term, digital, we're talking about helping with things like energy savings by giving us better data, using sensors and so on, helping us become more efficient. And longer term, I think, you know, some of the digital technologies that we're talking about will bring about bigger shifts that will bring about, you know, more revolutionary approaches to sustainable manufacturing. And I would always bow to Steve Evans at IFM at Cambridge, who's done a lot of work looking at how does digital play a role in the future sustainability of manufacturing. And this is a diagram that's pinched from him, and you can again you can see this actually. It's on the Made Smarter website, this diagram, and it talks about some of the digital technologies and how at different points they might make a difference to sustainable manufacturing. He talks about this kind of phase one being where digital tools in the short term are helping us become more efficient, but as we move into phase two and phase three, it's more disruptive. So again, not the topic for today, just some of the things I'm throwing out, but what does that mean for people? How is it going to change people in the workplace? My next kind of topic is around equality, diversity and well-being. And I've got to be honest and say manufacturing in the UK doesn't have a particularly good track record on diversity and well-being. And at the end of last year, I was actually asked to sit on a working group by the Scottish Government because this was something that was concerning them. If you look at the statistics in Scotland in manufacturing industry, 98% of the manufacturing workforce are white, 76.6% are male, and 36.5% are over 50. So some real challenges there. So the working group that I was on had some really interesting people, and we've a wee report. I've got a picture there. If anybody's interested, we made some recommendations to the Scottish Government about how we can address some of these challenges, and digital has a part to play in it. And a big part of it is around how digital can help us attract a more diverse workforce, which I think is really important. And I also think there's a link there to the sustainability issue. I think we're seeing people become more interested in working for sustainable employers. And I think digital is helping us with sustainability, and there's a knock-on effect there. So it's all linked. Personally, I think that, you know, digital manufacturing, digital tools, I've got a lot of things they can do to help. I mean, whether we're talking about cobots doing heavy lifting in manufacturing and letting people stay in the workplace longer, whether you're talking about virtual reality, going into more dangerous places and making it a safer environment, or whether it's you're talking about more flexible working and letting people work from wherever they want in the world and making it a more attractive place to work. So some of the equality, diversity thoughts. And then the other thing, this is just a short slide about resilience. Now, I mean, a number of years ago, again, when I first started talking to Roger, a lot of what we were talking about was about lean and efficiency. Whereas now I think we talk more about resilience, and there's changing attitudes to that. Again, not going into an awful lot of detail here. My co-director, Jan Godsall, who's based at Loughborough, she's leading some work on the future of work, but looking at what manufacturing ecosystems might look like. And the future of work and manufacturing ecosystems, again, lots of commonality there that we work together. But But things that might become important and why digital might be important for people in the workplace might be around how do we encourage people to create new partnerships, new collaborations? How do we manage these collaborations? And how do we lead in a distributed and collaborative environment? Some real interesting challenges that we're doing work on in that space. Again, takes us on to leadership and skills. Quite a lot of work going on in this space, some more general kind of reading that I've put up here, but within my own project, when we're out talking to companies, we're actually running round tables at the moment with different sectors. I did one last week or the week before with the kind of pharmaceutical sector, asking them what some of their challenges are for a digital manufacturing future in pharmaceutical space, and asking about digital and skills. So happy to chat around that if people are interested. And the last kind of slide in this kind of what about the future is something I pinched off Sean Cully, who's a kind of futurologist, and he presented at the Interact conference back in October. And this kind of resonated with me because what he said is Amara's law, which I wasn't familiar with, but what he said is people tend to overestimate the impact of technology in the short term, but underestimate it in the long term. So when I'm out speaking to companies, this is something I recognize, I think is very true. You know, people think things might change, but the pace is maybe not always accurate, if you're right. So again, I'd be interested to speak to the DIGITLab people and see what your experience is in that space. So I've thrown out kind of lots of things that I hope we'll pick up in discussion, and I want to move on to the kind of second part of my talk, which is more about talking about Made Smarter and Interact, because I'd like to, as I say, I'd like to encourage more collaboration. So I'm going to pivot a little bit and move on to this kind of Made Smarter and Interact. And I'm guessing a lot of you will be familiar with Made Smarter. As I say, back in 2017, I think it was, that Jürgen Mayer, who at that point was head of Siemens in the UK, was commissioned by the UK government to look forward at what industrial digitalisation might mean for us. And since then, we've been talking about Made Smarter and Industry 4 and all these things. My point is, we're doing a lot in this space, it's fantastic, but we need to talk about people more. That's the key message that I would like to talk about. So for those of you who aren't so familiar, Made Smarter has got various parts to it. So there's people who are focusing more on Made Smarter adoption. Made Smarter innovation is more the part that's looking at development of new technologies, the innovation space. And this is where UKRI, so people like EPSRC, ESRC, and the research councils, this is where a lot of their funding is coming in. So there's a number of research centres that are funded as part of Made Smarter Innovation. There's 5 of them, and I speak to them regularly. There's Made Smarter Hubs, and Made Smarter Hubs are where you can see some of the technologies in practice, and companies might be interested to come along and visit and talk about the technologies. And this is where Interact also has a role in helping think about, well, what about the people side of things? Other things that are funded through Made Smarter Innovation are collaborative R&D, so that's Innovate UK, and that funding would go direct to companies and university partners. And digital accelerators, again, helping the kind of more the tech companies and get started. And Interact, as I say, which is focused on the people side, the softer side, the non-technological, non-technology side. And Interact is actually funded by ESRC, so that's the economic and social sciences that we're interested in. Overall, Made Smarter Innovation, again, this comes from Made Smarter's slide pack. You can see there's a lot of money going in here, 147 million to try and help this kind of development and adoption of digital technologies in manufacturing. And you can see there where the money's kind of going out, and the wee black bit at the back, Made Smarter Innovation Networks, that's where Interact sits. So it can pick up on any of these if anybody's interested. Interact kind of we collaborate with all these people. There's research centres, the hubs, the accelerators, and so on. So I know a little bit about what's happening in most of them. I've already said the kind of digital technologies we're talking about tends to be more the industrial digital technologies, but this is not an exhaustive list. So now I'm just going to kind of talk a little bit about Interact and see if there's anything that people resonates with anybody, and perhaps there's room for us working together. So we already started by saying that I'm co-director and I'm based at Strathclyde with Jan Godsall, who's based at Loughborough. And Interact is what they call a network plus. And it's funded, started a little over a year ago in November 2021. And it runs until December 2024. So 3 years funded project. And it's all about human insights. Now we got 4.4 million was kind of our initial grant, and this came from the Economic and Social Research Council. So it's all about the softer side, the people side. And what they're hoping Interact will do is bring out insights from the social sciences. And when I say the social sciences, it could be business, it could be psychology, it could be political science, it could be geography, could be history, you know, the softer social sciences. But bring some of that expertise to help with this challenge we have of encouraging digital take-up in manufacturing. So as I say, bring these insights from social sciences, but we've also got a role to play in that kind of creating this network that's going to support manufacturing. So with the technologists, with the scientists, and now also the social scientists. Now, more recently, we've actually been given a top-up of our grant. So this is something I'm really excited about that's starting this month. We've got an extra £1.2 million to look at what's happening internationally. Now, this is something I said right at the very start when we started to Interact, because much as, you know, it's UKRI money and we're very much focused on the UK, we can't do this in isolation. We have to understand what's happening in other parts of the world. So the 1.2 million we've got that starts this month and runs till the end of December 2024, we're going to be doing work looking at what are other countries doing? What can we learn from other people? Where's our competition coming from? What are some of the issues internationally that we should be focusing on? And that's just about to kick off at the end of this month. So I'm going to talk really quickly about some of the things that you might be interested in getting involved in within Interact. So we're a Network Plus, and what we're all about is we're trying to enable the future we want for UK manufacturing. So we're thinking about the future focused, and we've really got kind of a number of kind of key areas of work. Now, if we start with the pink column here, we've got a core research programme. And under the core research programme, we've got 3 themes. We've got the future of manufacturing ecosystems, and that's a kind of work stream that's been led by Jan out of Loughborough. And it's looking about what are supply chains going to look like, what's the ecosystem going to look like. And that's really looking at scenarios for the future. I'm kind of leading the core research around the future of manufacturing work, along with some colleagues from work and employment at Strathclyde University. And the third core research stream is about the future of the economy linked to manufacturing. And that's been led by Vania Sena at Sheffield and Philip McGann, who has recently moved to Manchester. So they're looking at manufacturing. What happens in manufacturing is very linked to what happens in the rest of the economy. But likewise, the economy is very linked to what happens in manufacturing. So that's what they're looking at. So some of our money has been spent on that core research, which is future looking. But half our money is being spent on commissioned research. And that's kind of filling in gaps that we don't have knowledge on at the moment, but industry thinks we need. So if we hear from our advisory board or from, from being out speaking to industry that there's certain things that are unknown that we need more work into, then we will use some of our funding to commission research that fills some of these gaps. So we've got things like meta reviews, small project funding, sandpit funding, and I'll tell you a little bit about some of these in a second. And the other area we've got impact acceleration. And what that's about is that's kind of funding we've got where we know there's work in the social sciences that could be useful to manufacturers, but it's maybe work that at the moment is quite academic, that's talking to quite a niche audience. It's maybe work that's been published in academic journals. And what we're trying to do is identify some interesting work, fund the people that came up with these interesting things, and help them to put it into something useful and actionable for industry. And again, I'll tell you something about that in a second. And the other thing that runs across that is our knowledge exchange programme. And we're doing lots of interesting things, trying to encourage early career researchers. We're trying to encourage people to tell better stories about manufacturing. So we've got a storytelling academy. So lots of things that we can pick up on in the Q&A. I've already kind of told the story, I think, about our three areas of the core research. Looking to the future, 3 themes. So I'm not going to dwell on that too much. We can pick that up again. What I will just throw up on the screen is some of the research questions that we've got. So here, the questions about the future of manufacturing ecosystems. As I say, that's been led by Jan Godsell down at Loughborough. And the kind of things she's looking at is kind of business models, ecosystems, collaboration, distributed working, trust. These kind of things are what she's interested in. And I can take any questions and link you to some of her work and some of her, she's got events coming up. And then Vania, who's based at Sheffield, Vania Sena, she's looking at the economy side and the economics. And she's interested in things like knowledge diffusion and spillovers and what happens at regional levels. So again, some really interesting work that's going on there. She's been looking particularly at kind of Yorkshire region and looking at what's been happening there. And then she's rolling that out across the UK and looking at what might happen in the future in terms of the economy and how there might be benefits, not just in manufacturing to digitalisation, but what other benefits there might be to the economy. And then I run the future of work stream, and that's out of Strathclyde. And stupidly, we came up with 5 research questions. So we're looking at things like people management and digital transformation. How do people make decisions about where they invest? And thinking about people as part of the business case. There's not enough of that. Quite often we find that the business case for investment in digital is either technological or it's financial. We would love to see more examples where it actually starts with, here's how it's going to make a difference to people in our workplaces. We're looking at distributed leadership, to say that's kind of linked to the ecosystems work. And we're interested in perceptions of manufacturing work. And we've got a survey that's just going to go out in February. And it's a survey that we're looking to get across the UK, people of all ages. We know that we've got problems attracting people into manufacturing. So maybe one of the first steps is to understand what influences people's perceptions, what are the perceptions, and what's the role of digital here? Could digital play a role in helping us to improve the image of manufacturing? So really quickly, commissioned research. I'll rattle through this, but please, at the end, if you're interested, ask me some questions. So we run a couple of systematic reviews each year, and last year we had a couple of things looking at the historic, what can we learn from history, and one around business plans and the role of business plans in digital transformation. And these projects have been completed. They're just reporting on them now and getting them out into the public domain. But what you might be interested in is we've got a call that's going to open at the end of the month. We're just writing it just now. Again, it will close in March. This is for projects of 6 months, £60,000 for each project. I'm leading, well, I'm not leading it, I've written the brief for one that's around, I would like somebody to tell us what's happening in industrial strategy and digital transformation in the rest of the world. And Jan is interested in manufacturing in the metaverse. And these were things that came out of our strategic advisory board, things they thought we should be looking at. Again, if people are interested in bidding for that funding, just about to open, please do ask me some questions. Opened yesterday, where are we in dates? Yes, just opened. There's a call out for actionable insights. And this is for people who have been doing work, so have got interesting research, but they think they could turn it into something that's useful for industry or for policymakers. So it's work that's really completed, but turning it into, you know, a simple guide, an app, a tool, a seminar, an event. So if you've got something that you think is interesting, that could make a difference to manufacturers or to policy, please do have a look on the Interact website. The closing date for that is in April. You can apply at any time, and projects are up to 12 months and up to £18,000 each. So again, that's something that might be of interest if it's maybe people that have just finished your PhD, you want to do something useful with it, make some contacts in manufacturing, then that's a good one for you. Early career fellowships, again, really keen on encouraging early career fellows. We've got £5,000 per person. If you want to get involved, you don't have to do research. This is not for doing research. It's just £5,000 for you to spend as you want, as long as it helps you to engage in the community around people, manufacturing and digital. So it might be money to come to events, it might be money to organise events, or to start to plan out some work. So keep an eye on the website for that. We've got a sandpit coming up, a research sandpit, and we would like industry to come to that and academics. We've got dates penciled in the diary for the 15th to the 17th of May. And what we're going to do there is we're going to bring together 30 to 40 people around kind of a couple of topics still to be decided. Interdisciplinary people, so we want a real mix of people from different backgrounds, and you'll spend 2.5 days working together, coming up with proposals, and we will be funding projects at the end of that. They'll be pitching ideas, a fantastic opportunity, and it's 9-month projects that we're looking for. So get that one in the diary, those of you who are out looking with new ideas. And other things we've got going on, basically look at the Interact website. We've got fellowships, we've got conferences, we've got webinars, discovery days, lots and lots of things going on. So I think my last slide is just how do you get in contact with us? Look at our website in the first instance. We're on LinkedIn, we're on Twitter, all the usual places. But probably the first one is don't be scared just to drop me an email. So I'm Jillian.McBryde at strath.ac.uk, and happy to talk to any of you. But for just now, I think I'll stop sharing my screen and I'll ask, has anybody got any questions?
Thank you, Jill. That was great. It gives a lovely overview, both of the future of manufacturing, I guess, and what Interact is really keen on, and help for me understand some of the different areas that you're focusing on and what I know that Jan's focusing on. So I'm just looking at the questions. Somebody's asking for your email address. I'm sure we can sort that out.
Sure.
So I had a couple of thoughts. My first, I'm personally very interested in the resilience versus lean argument, you'd be unsurprised to learn. And like you, I'm hearing a lot of people talk about we need to create resilient supply chains. You know, are you, and the challenge, you know, that inevitably, and I would argue inevitably is the right word, inevitably that means they're more expensive because you built more stock into the system, you're less efficient, all sorts of things. Yeah. Are you doing some work in that space? Who do you recommend to people they go and read in that space?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's one of the things that when we kind of looked at, when we were kind of thinking about our core research, we did recognize that these three areas, the kind of the ecosystems, the people, and the economy, are so interlinked. You know, that it's great to say we want to buy more local or whatever, be more resilient, but we've got to recognize, as you say, that comes with a cost. Can we afford to pay for it? You know, right now, not really. You know, and the evidence that we're starting to see, well, the anecdotal evidence that we're seeing, I think, is actually pointing to the exact opposite. That whilst we talk about resilience and we talk about wanting to buy more local, when we actually look at the data of what's happening in the UK at the moment, we're buying more from low-cost economies and overseas, which is not the direction of travel we really want. I think probably my colleagues Jan and Vanya would talk much more eloquently on the detail of that one, Roger. But yeah, I'm more the kind of the people person that gets involved in the conversations, but they're doing more the in-depth research there.
So we're getting some questions. Kyle, I promise I'll come to yours in a second, but Steve Cox asks, what's the largest barrier to people not embracing digital transformation in industry?
Oh, I think there's so many different barriers, isn't there? I think language is something we're finding is language is an interesting one. Language about manufacturing generally. I think language about digital. And I think that's something we're talking more and more about. What is the right language, and how do we change how we talk about these things? I think we're finding a lot of the big companies understand the landscape a bit better. They understand, you know, the need for digital more. I think there's an awful lot of smaller companies that are, you know, they're so busy with the day-to-day that they don't have the chance to look at the future. They don't have the chance to stop and think about digital and where they should be investing. And I think that's a gap that we can do an awful, like both of our networks can do an awful lot in that space. And I also think there's things that we need to be pushing back to the schools and to the universities and the colleges about, you know, what are the skills and the training that's needed for these things to happen in the near future and the distant future. Yep,
I think there are some very big issues there. So I am going to ask Kyle's question before I forget. So Kyle, picking up on that you had a slide which talked about manufacturing and service, and recognizing that there are lessons to be learned about digital adoption, digital transformation in service sector, which works in manufacturing and service. But he's trying to get a sense around where you're drawing your boundary, where are you saying, you know, is Interact really about manufacturing and servitization, you know, the servitization?
I would say Interact is interested in companies who make things. That's really what we're you know, the focus is manufacturing. Those of you who know me will know that I quite often say there's lots of jobs in manufacturing where you don't have to be an engineer. So I am interested in, you know, we need to make things. We need to attract people into manufacturing, companies that make things. But it's not all about being engineers. There's also a lot of service elements there. And as you say, the kind of blurring of people that make things and provide a service. If you make something, I'm interested in you. Yeah.
And is that really, for those who are clearly going to make bids into Interact, is that the sick, you know, really, is it the sick code of manufacturing, or is it broader than that?
Not a fan of sick codes myself. So I think probably most of the people that you're talking about, we would be happy looking at them. As long as you can say that you've got something that will be of interest to companies that make things, we're interested in you. So your background could be a service background. You might not have any experience yourself of manufacturing. I would say great. We welcome you on board. It's things like that we're interested in, as long as it's going to be of interest to manufacturing. Cool.
All right. So we have one from Hannah, which is around transdisciplinary working. You know, the importance of transdisciplinary working in terms of enabling, as she puts it, enabling the development of competencies. The importance of transdisciplinary work and in the enabling of competencies, particularly in cyber-physical systems.
Yeah.
So any thoughts on that?
Hannah, you and I could probably talk all day and all night about that. I mean, I'm a big fan on whether it's interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary. You know, I just think it's so important. It's great that we're starting to do more of it, and I think we're starting to see much more funding come that way. But we need to do a lot more. I would love to see an awful lot more of our kind of basic education programs, our courses in universities, our PhD programs, bringing this kind of transdisciplinary approach. One of the centres that's funded by Made Smarter, based at Bath, is again looking at people, but it's very much about that kind of transdisciplinary space. So again, come on board and kind of join our little group that has that as a passion.
So the next one's around developing nations, and clearly you've gone international. So are you, I assume you are, you're getting engaged in some way in digital transformation, digital technology adoption, not just in, you know, the USA and large manufacturing countries like China, but where are you around developing nations?
Personally, it's not something that is not one of my research areas or anything, but I think when we said to UKRI that we wanted to interact, not just to focus on UK. At first they were like, well, it's UK funding, so we want to focus on the UK. What we're now looking at is we're looking at things but that can help us understand and position the UK manufacturing. So it's not that we're suddenly going to go off and start researching developing countries and how they do it, but what we're more interested in is looking at what's happening and understanding that landscape. Again, when we started talking to UKRI, they wanted us maybe to push us in the direction of looking at particular countries, you know, your Singapores, your USAs, your Germanys. And what we said was, we don't really want to just limit it to certain countries. What we'd rather do, and the approach that we're going to take, is more working with companies and their supply chains and trying to understand how bigger firms and their supply chains make decisions about digital across the globe. And that will take us into the territory of developing countries. But as I say, it's not a research, it's not something, it's not an area I'm branching into, but we will be looking at developing countries.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a classic one, isn't it? It's kind of, anybody who works with UK manufacturing knows that lots of them are owned by international companies, and their working practices are influenced by those head offices and the ways things work. And
Exactly.
You cannot just see the UK in isolation. It's a very narrow view. One more. So around the ability of people in the industry to be able to come up with the case, making a business case for digitising. And it's kind of, what have you seen the best practice around that? What are you seeing as, you know, how that's working, particularly maybe in smaller companies you might want to talk to?
Yeah, I mean, that's something we are interested in, and we gave funding to Ahmad Beltagi at Aston University, and he was kind of looking at what can we learn from history, but also looking at that kind of business case. So some interesting work there that he's starting to roll out. From my perspective, when we're out talking to people, when we're talking to companies about the people side, I wish I could say that more companies start the conversation by saying we want to make this place better for the people that work in it.
Right.
But too often I'm finding it's, you know, it's coming from we went to a seminar and we heard about this great technology, let's do it in this company. Or it is about the finance people saying we need to cut costs, so we need to be more efficient, so we need to do this. What my particular work stream is looking at, and this will come out kind of later in this year, is we're trying to look for some nice cases of people who do it well, starting with people. So that is an area that I'm hoping I will be able to publish.
Quickly, I've only got a couple of minutes. Anybody that you would highlight as doing it well?
Do you know, I might surprise you, but it's not manufacturing, but some of the allied people to do with healthcare, some of the health organisations, and even the NHS actually is might be the starting point for some of that.
Interesting. All right, I think we're at 1:27, which I think is a good point to come to. And you've been brilliant, fantastic at answering questions. I really appreciate it.
I see there's something there in Scotland as well, but if people want to pick up with me, you've got my email. I'm happy to talk offline, but be great to sit down with you guys at DIGITLab and look at how we can work closer together on some of these things.
Yeah, I think we should do a waving of hands and say thank you very much. The sort of digital response to thank you. I just want to remind people that DIGITLab has another seminar coming up in a month's time by Alexandra Brintrup. I'm sure you know Alexandra, Jill, out at IFM, Institute for Manufacturing, with some really interesting control systems stuff that they're doing at IFM. So that'll be very interesting. At some time in March, Fran did send me the date, so I'll just quickly look it up. 22nd of March. So our next talk will be Alexandra Brintrup from IFM, 22nd of March. Once more, thank you, Jill. You were fantastic. I appreciate it. We'll be in touch. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks very much. See you guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.